To be pro-abortion is to not be Christian. Because the only way to be pro-abortion and Christian, as James helpfully demonstrates, is to absolutely torture the text of the Bible. It's to come up with the most perverse and heretical theological arguments imaginable. To be pro-abortion is to be guilty of heresy. You know, we've talked about James Talarico before. He's a Democrat representative in Texas, running for Senate now, and he calls himself a Christian, a seminarian actually, but he's a heretic and a blasphemer. And on that note, this clip is going viral right now from what I think is a Joe Rogan episode from a little while ago, maybe a few months ago. But here he is trying to articulate the Christian argument, as if there is one, for abortion. Listen.
But I say all this in context of abortion because before God comes over Mary and we have the incarnation, God asks for Mary's consent, which is remarkable. I mean, go back and read this in Luke. I mean, the angel comes down and asks Mary if this is something she wants to do. And she says, if it is God's will, let it be done. Let it be. Let it happen. So to me, that is an affirmation in one of our most central stories that creation has to be done with consent. You cannot force someone to create. Creation is one of the most sacred acts that we engage in as human beings. But that has to be done with consent. It has to be done with freedom. And to me, that is absolutely consistent with the ministry and life and death of Jesus. And so that's how I come down on that side of the issue.
Man. Yeah, that's a really compelling theological point if you're retarded. But for everyone else, you know, there are a million problems. First of all, let's get this out of the way. God does not need our consent for anything. Creation does not require, the Creator does not require consent from his creation. God does not need or require our consent at all. You know, God can do what he wants. And this is what you get from a leftist degenerate scumbag with his consent-based morality. And it's consent-based morality in the sense that the only moral law anyone on the left recognizes is consent. When it should be that consent that's one of the things. In order for an act to be moral, consent, but then other things also. That should not be the only thing. There should be, the moral law should go far beyond consent. So, but if you're on the left, that's the only moral rule that you pretend to recognize. And even that they don't recognize, obviously. They don't actually care about consent. Because what about abortion? Does the baby consent to that? Is there any consent there? Of course not. I mean, they don't even think that the father should have to consent to the murder of his own child. So I say they have consent-based morality in that that's the only moral law they recognize, but they don't even actually recognize that. Because what their actual moral law is that they individually should be able to do whatever they want. Do what you will is the whole of their law. That's Satanism. That's what Satanism is. So they are Satanists. And this, James Talarico, when I call that satanic, I mean it in every sense. I mean it in a literal sense. So God does not require consent. Creation is a divine act, and God never speaks to us and asks us whether we consent to him creating anything. And in the story he's referring to, there is no request. So he's wrong about that. The angel appears to Mary and says, behold, you have found favor with God. You will conceive in your womb and bear a son. Okay. James says that, God comes and asks if that's something she'd be okay with. So now what God is like, it's talking about God and God's language as though he's some shift manager, as if he's some middle manager in a company somewhere, coming up to your cubicle like, hey, is that something you'd be okay with? Hey, I was just thinking. I was just thinking that you could, you could bear the Son of God in your womb. Is that something you'd be okay with? What do you think? Yay or nay? Hey, get back to me EOD, okay? Shoot me an email. No, it's actually not what happens. He said, the angel says, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son. Not will you, but you will. Pretty important distinction. And Mary responds by saying, let it be done to me according to your will. So she's responding with obedience. Yes, she is exercising her free will, and that is important. But it's also the case that there was no request. There was no question posed. And God did not owe a request or a question or even an explanation, though he did provide one. And Mary acted out of obedience to the will of God, which again, yes, is a very important part of the story. That's all totally irrelevant to the point he's trying to make, because what we're talking about in that story is conception. You will conceive in your womb, the Christ child. But abortion, by definition, is not preventing conception. It is not preventing the creation of life. It is killing life which has already been created. So even if Mary had not responded with obedience and not responded with submission, it would not have been analogous to abortion, obviously. Abortion kills a child who has already been conceived, who already exists. That's the whole reason why when they talk about reproductive rights, as I've said so many times, reproductive rights, out of all the dishonest euphemisms the left uses, is certainly the most dishonest and the most destructive. Because this is not about reproductive rights. Abortion has nothing to do with reproductive rights. By the time the abortion happens, reproduction has already occurred. Okay? Reproduction has already occurred by the time the abortion happens. That's why the abortion is happening. Abortion kills the life that has already been produced. Reproduction has already happened. Reproduction, the way these idiots talk about it, it's like they think that the birth itself is reproduction. It is not. There's a reason why when we talk about the reproductive act, we're not talking about birth. Okay, you don't engage in the reproductive act in the birthing unit at the hospital, or at least I hope you don't. The reproductive act is the sexual act which results in conception. And as soon as conception has happened, that is reproduction. So, and this is why you cannot be a pro-abortion Christian. This is why I say pro-abortion Christianity or pro-choice Christianity is a contradiction in terms. It's not even that a Christian shouldn't be pro-abortion. It's not even that. It's that you can't be. To be pro-abortion is to not be Christian. Because the only way to be pro-abortion and Christian, as James helpfully demonstrates, is to absolutely torture the text of the Bible. It's to come up with the most perverse and heretical theological arguments imaginable. To be pro-abortion is to be guilty of heresy. It's required. I mean, let's just start with the fact that the pro-abortion argument must mean that Jesus Christ before birth was not human, was just a clump of cells. It's also to reject the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. It's to reject every Bible verse that explicitly affirms the humanity and dignity of the unborn, such as Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. It's to reject 2,000 years of Christian teaching. And it's to suggest that God makes human life, creates a baby in the womb, and is okay with us deciding to dismember that baby limb from limb and throw him in the trash. That's what the pro-abortion Christian is saying. That God performs the miraculous act of creation. But if we decide to throw the creation in the trash, he's cool with it. That's what the pro-abortion Christian is saying, is that God sees us. Miraculous act, child is created, child is killed, thrown in the trash, and God says, hey, cool, your choice, man. Hey, your choice. Cool, whatever you want to do, totally fine. These are not just theologically insane arguments. They are blasphemous, they are heretical, and they are incompatible with Christianity. So if you're a Christian and you're pro-abortion, well, you're not Christian. You're a liar, you're a fraud, you're a fake, and your faith is not real. And I can say that. I can say that for the same reason I can say that there's no such thing as a square circle.